absolutely. If they wanted to get in contact with me, the best way to do that would be to go to financeandfaith.com. Again, that's financeandfaith.com. They could actually read and learn a little bit more about myself. They can watch a brief video. They can watch a video that's gone viral, frankly, across the country. And they can fill out a form which would allow me personally to be able to reach out and get in contact with them.
Okay, before we conclude our follies here with our fantastic 5 o'clock guest, Mr. Jamel J. Double Johnson, the pastor, photographer, and what was the other P for, Ray? Playwright, yeah. He's written a play that was so fantastic that he's written part 2, and we haven't seen part 1 yet.
Oh, wow.
So I can't wait to see part 1 and actually part 2. But we were talking about the state of the world as you see it. You care to share that with us?
Yeah, well, one of the things that right now, if we take a look at a snapshot of our culture, one of the things we can see is that we have people who are struggling financially. And it's interesting because we live in a time where you hear people say they make as much money as they've ever made before, but yet they seem to be struggling more than we've ever seen people struggle before. And I believe that that's a big part of that is because we see so many people today have fallen into the trap of debt. And it's amazing how many things today seem normal. You get somebody who will go out and they'll finance an automobile for $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 or more. And that's normal today. You'll see someone take out a mortgage on a home and they say, well, I'll just mortgage this house for $250,000. But if you actually stretch it out over the life of that 30 years, you'll realize that they're paying over $400,000. They're more than doubling the price of that home. Credit card debt has become a normal place. Student loan is probably one of the most dangerous debts that you can go into. Is obviously the one that you cannot escape any other way other than through debt. In most cases, they cannot be eliminated through filing bankruptcy. And so we live in a very challenging time where people are trying to figure out how do we take care of our families? How do we live our priorities as opposed to our obligations? And, we are obligated to keep a roof over our head and food on the table, but yet, we have priorities in our lives. We have those things that we're passionate about. We have those things that God has called us to, and when you start talking about those things, and you look and you say, well, what's happened to so many people that they're not chasing down their passions, that they're not living the life that God has called them to live? And that's because they've given up in so many instances. They've just decided to exist, in this world that we're in right now because they just don't know what to do.
Man, there's probably 13 things I want to say in reference to that, but well, let me ask you, and you may not have the answer to this, but why do we prioritize our lives based on the wants as opposed to the needs?
Well, there's maybe a half a dozen reasons for that. One is that we today have become a microwave society. We want it now. And because we want it now, no one's teaching any longer delayed gratification. We are an instant gratification culture today. And so that's one reason people sell their future, because they're buying everything right in the here and now. You see people walk through the store with their children, and their children are screaming for these items, and the parents give in so many instances, even though they can't afford it. But, I heard someone say once that if they had room in their credit card, they had money. Well, how in the world did they get to a place where they believe that to be true? And here's what I'm ultimately to tell you. This is maybe the biggest reason why I believe that so many people today sacrifice what they want today as opposed to practicing delayed gratification. And that is because we're being enticed into a matrix. It's called the financial matrix. And there's actually been a book written on it today by a gentleman named Orrin Woodward, who's ranked by Inc. magazine as one of the top 50 leadership professionals in the world. If you look at our media today, we are in fact in a media war. Turn on your television set, turn on your radio, and every other commercial is enticing you into purchasing items with money that you don't have. And so that's really what's happening today. And so we as a culture, we fall victim to that because frankly, nobody's teaching us any different. Even our educational system is really designed to teach us to enter the matrix. One of the things I like to point out oftentimes to people, how there's when you talk about a matrix, a financial matrix, what I'm talking about is there are the elites in this country that what they look to do is maximize their profits by controlling the physical labor of the masses, or the productive capacity of the masses is maybe a better way of putting it. And so let me give you an example. If we look at history, we can see it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say that there are elites in this country that will want to maximize their profits. And so we can look throughout history and see that slavery was about the elites in the country maximizing their profits by controlling the productive capacity of an entire mass of people. It wasn't about someone saying, "Oh, I just don't feel like cleaning up my house." Is if you can control an entire mass of people and control their production, then, and frankly, what you can then do is have a ton of people working in the fields, which will maximize your profits. It gives you leverage. Well, today, since it's kind of frowned upon to enslave people, what they actually do is to say, well, how do we still control the productive capacity of the masses? Well, what they do is if they can entice you and I into debt, they can now control your production, because now they force you to have to go out and earn money in real dollars in order to cover that debt. Now, I want to point something out real quick. If you think about it, if you take the elites in this country, let's use the banking system for a moment. The banking system right now, for every $100 you borrow, they only have to have $10 in reserve. So 10% of whatever they loan out in reserve. So if you go out and you borrow $100,000, you only have to have $10,000 in real dollars in reserve. Now you borrow that money, and it's really not real money, it's fake money, because they never had to have the physical money on hand. You never received the physical dollars. And so if you go do that, and you have to pay that money back, though, in real production, in real labors, in real dollars. And so you pay that money back over time. And you don't pay them back $1,000 if you borrowed $1,000. You maybe pay back twice that amount of money, and you have to go put in real physical labor in order to make that money.
Would you not have paid them back $90,000 on the $10,000 actual dollars that they've loaned you?
Yes. Wait, say it again. 90,000 on 10? No, because if you think about it, it's whatever the interest rate is over the time frame. So you don't necessarily pay back 90,000 on 10,000, but if you go borrow 10,000 and the interest rate over whatever time frame you pay it back. So if we use a house, for example, you take a house that's $250,000 over the course of 30 years, depending on your interest rate, you double that, maybe even triple it in that time frame. So think about this for a moment. That means, how much money of that $250,000 did they actually have on hand when they loaned you $250,000? Did they really put $250,000 in your hand? Did you ever see the $250,000 in cash?
No.
No, you didn't. So if you realize that if everyone went to the bank at the same time to withdraw their money, they wouldn't have it. It's called fractional reserve banking. So they wouldn't have it on hand. So imagine for a moment you could loan out $100 to someone, but you didn't give them an actual $100. You only had $10 on you. Mm-hmm. So you loan them $100, and let's say they have to pay you back $200, but they have to pay you back $200 in real money.
Right?
Couldn't you get wealthy too?
I would imagine so, sir.
Exactly. The whole system is set up, and so you got the big banks, who that system is designed for them to create wealth. You have government, and the government is in debt too, but the government allows it to go on, and the reason the government allows it to go on is because the government don't have to pay that money back. Think about it. The government's in debt. Who pays their debt?
Let me pause you right there, and we'll talk about who pays the debt after we take this quick break here at
Sure.
Ferguson USA Hot Talk Radio.